Hey guys, how's it going? I'm at Lighty, and we're going to be discussing a little bit about the Endless Delve event, which builds are viable, what things you want to look out for, and the haves and have-nots for accessibility. So for those who don't know in general, Delve is a mechanic that you access at the very beginning of Act 4 that essentially allows you to travel downwards in the Azurite mine, helping out Nico, the master of Delve, and it lets you purchase flares and dynamites and upgrade your little rolling cart. And the little rolling cart's a pretty cool little mechanic. Basically, it's a crawler that helps you progress downward into the delve. And you access new nodes, and it spawns quote unquote infinitely in every direction. And it basically means you traverse the mine looking for Azurite, which allows you to purchase more upgrades and purchase resonators for fossil crafting, but also just, find some cool shit like smugglers' weapons, and you basically just follow the crawler. Now, the only annoying thing about Delve, for the most part, is the gating of Sulfite. Sulfite's the mechanic on the right. This is what it costs to use the crawler, to move the cart, and to access Delve. Sulfite's acquired from maps, and you could use it whether it's from your Nico daily master missions or just finding wild Nicos. But Endless Delve is essentially Delve, but without the Sulfite. So you're always at cap sulfite, which means there's no constraints of how deep or far you can go, and the only limitations are your build and your gear. There are some extra limitations imparted with this league itself. Because in Endless Delve, they state that you can never leave the mine. You're just stuck in the mine. That's the extent of your accessibility. And you do get your ascendancies progressively and Lily Roth for gems. You don't have access to your town or hideouts. It means you'll just be taking on the darkness 100% solo all the time, meaning no trading and a lot of mechanics. A bunch of those mechanics include this. I basically made a spreadsheet that goes over the gist of the things you can and can't have access. So certain things you can't get are cluster jewels. You can't get any of the boss drops. You can't get prophecy, bestiary, harbinger, really good specters, no crafting bench, no anoints for blight, no upgraded breach uniques, no labyrinth uniques, synthesis items, including the rings, which are big, no divination card hand-in, so div cards do nothing, no incursion uniques, betrayal uniques or crafts, pantheons are questionable still, and catalysts. These are like an example of things that you won't have access to, and this really does hinder a lot of builds. Things you can get that are really good are +1 specter chest, if you can find a good specter, which there really isn't any. Curse on hit rings is huge. Fossil crafting, precursor rings from farming bosses, and Shaper and Elder influence can spawn, but no other influences can drop and delve. These are a list of things that you want, and I'll explain why in each one. Curse on hit gloves. So, a large chunk of your damage, because in the endgame path, it gets invested in the cluster jewels. You don't have access to cluster jewels, that's going to be a real hit in your damage. That, 20 points you're spending on cluster jewels can be represented somewhere else in a super viable way when it comes to investing damage for elemental builds specifically. That's actually curse effectiveness. There's 3 different really curse nodes you can have access to. You have the Whispers of Doom wheel, you have the Hexmaster wheel over here, and all the way by Scion is the little baby Malicious Intent wheel. All this stuff gives you increased damage, curse effect, and it actually stacks up to a noticeable amount. I think this will be one of the strongest strategies going forward for recouping some of that lost damage from you not having access to cluster jewels. And that's why it brings me to the first point, curse on hit gloves. Essentially, because you don't have access to crafting, you don't have access to a lot of things, one of the best methods for getting damage is getting weak on hit gloves, or vulnerability on gloves, or just temp chains on gloves, curse on gloves in general. So anytime you're doing this Endless Delve event and you find a pair of gloves that has like 60 life and 30 res, you want to Val it. Toss a Val in it. Hopefully you get a curse. Curse on hit rings, these are from specialty nodes. What constitutes a specialty node is any of the nodes that has pretty much like a fire, contains fire items, contains cold items, contains lighting items. So this is going to have potentially chests, jewelry chests, that drop rings that have flammability on hit. Having access to double curse on hit is huge. Massive damage recoup there. Cast when damage taken plus offering and void. This is reference to Void Sphere plus cast damage taken and offerings. Void Sphere is one of the new spells they introduced, and it actually has a really interesting thing where it sucks up corpses mechanically. It eats corpses. So consuming corpses is huge. And offerings are bone, flesh, and spirit offerings, which again consumes corpses. And the reason I'm mentioning 2 things that consume corpses really stems back to the fact that there is a lot of on-death effect. You have on-death effects that give you cold dot damage in the ground, or on-death effects that explode, or on-death effects that do chaos damage. So having a way of consuming corpses and preventing on-death effects, or even, detonate dead, because Beyond is a common spawnable mod. When you start getting down in Delve, you'll notice that different areas have different mods. Underneath where it says Fungal Cavern, you'll see different list of mod pools. Sometimes you'll get mod pools that include Beyond. Beyond is one of the spookiest mods you can get. that and elemental penetration. Here's an example of a zone that has slaying monsters has additional chance to extract beyond. So these are zones that you tend to avoid in hardcore. So, cast damage taken is amazing. Phase run plus duration. You can put phase run on your left click instead of moving. Your normal movement is just your movement, but if you had something like phase run there, similar to you having a dash on left click, it'll just allow you to phase through enemies. And you could also just do this by having a quartz flask, but phase run left click is a nice way to get from zone to zone. Immunity flasks, it's your bog standard, freeze, shock, ailment immunity. Again, we have no crafting benches, right? So it's hard. You can't master craft on ailment immunity, so it's a hard thing to come by. You can get some ailment immunity from shaper influence, but I wouldn't plan on it happening. General cry plus vigilance, interesting. Vigilance strikes a melee skill that can't be evaded and always applies 4 to 5 buff to us. 4 to 5 buff being an insane buff in itself. That gives us, 20% less damage taken from hits, which is huge, covers a lot of bases. And General Cry is a war cry that actually taunts enemies, summons warriors from nearby corpses, and they deliver an exerted attack with the linked trigger skill. So if you link General Cry plus Vigilant Strike, you'll have it on left click again. You could summon people who will walk out, Vigilant Strike things giving you Fortify. So free way of getting Fortify. It's a nice little combo there. And if you want it automated, if you pick up the Call to Arms, you can essentially, again, put it on your left click and just walk around with it happening. Frostwall plus Cascade, really only for deep delve, but it's just a way of physically blocking projectiles. Conversion Trap Sandstorm node. Again, it's a very specific thing. There's a lot of specific things, like node and boss specific loadouts, which I'm not really going to get into. If you start getting to depth 800, some of these things start becoming important, like Val Summon Skeletons for body blocking things, or even having knockback plus ball lightning. But there is actually a node, non-ironically, where Conversion Trap is used to prevent sandstorms from spawning. It's a deep meme. Smoke Bind is very beneficial for a lot of the boss mechanics, that you cheese a lot of things. Dynamite, another fantastic mechanic for cheesing bosses. For those who don't know, Dynamites, which is on your, I have it on my mouse 4 and mouse 5, makes it much easier to do. This explosion does stun bosses, and if it does stun a boss, it will stun them and phase them. All bosses pretty much have the same attack pattern. 3 auto attacks, then do a mechanic, then 3 auto attacks, then do a mechanic. Well, if you catch them after the 3rd auto attack, hit them with the dynamite, kaboom, it'll stop their mechanic from happening, and they go back to a 3 auto attack rotation. This is a great way of phasing them from, straight from 100% to 50%, and they can just bypass all these dangerous mechanics. Culling Strike, just great everywhere. Blind, again, super defensive, great. Arcane Surge plus movement skill. If you have issues with mana or want some extra damage, just put on your dash Arcane Surge. Pretty much a catch-all trick for the rest of the game. Painted Tomb at Deep. So one of the best things you can have when you start getting to deeper delve is just extra damage, and Painted Tomb is a key to that. Essentially, if you just accept the fact that you're going to have infinite sulfite, you could realistically just corpse run node to node. If I'm pretty much dying left and right, but I don't really care because I'm level 94 and I'm just done leveling, pick up Pantomime, because you're only really going to die on the nodes that have things that are bypassing you chaos damage wise. So it doesn't really matter how many attempts it takes from get to A to B, as long as you get there. And that extra amount of damage from paying attunement in a lot of scenarios is probably going to get you there. Ball lightning plus knockback is an interesting way of knocking back enemies back into the darkness. This is going to prevent them from getting aggressive sometimes. So funny mechanics. And Skitterbots is just insane in general. These are things you need when you go to deep delve. Pretty much any build can get to 400 depth. No problem. If you're not planning on going any deeper than 400, you can essentially ignore everything I'm talking about and just play whatever you want, because you'll be able to just make it happen. But past then, that's when things start to matter. Corpse removal is key. Aberrath Pantheon is for Burning Ground. There are a lot of areas in the magma zones, magma fissure zones, that do have Burning Ground mechanics. And again, if you're playing Chaos Inoculation as a ZHP build, or basically like a glass cannon build, that shit'll just one-shot you. So having that Aberrath for Burning Ground is super, super important. Gross single target just comes down to the fact that when certain rares spawn, if you don't have the single target to clear them, you're going to be a sad boy. So single target's a must. Same with phasing. Not getting body blocked is insane, and off-screen clear comes with the territory. Pretty much every mechanic should have chain on it to just try to clear as much as you can. These are some nice little tips and tricks. I'm going to have this linked in the description below, so you can review this and talk amongst your friends. But what we've done on stream over the past 3 days is look at every single delve build that has been played in the past 6 months and aggregate them essentially into 8 different categories. These are the 8 different categories. If you're playing a build in delve and it's not one of these 8 categories, it's probably not solo self-found viable, and it's probably not viable within the constraints of what we can and cannot get. So we're going to go over each one very briefly, and then you can obviously check them out yourselves and make a decision what you want to play from there. So first up is Assassin, Chieftain, Blade builds, pretty much. These constitute Blade Vortex, Blade Blast, And whether it's Chieftain or Assassin, these both are just great builds. You could do poison versions, you could do elemental versions, but they pretty much cover all bases. Assassin has a lot more damage, Chieftain's a lot more defensive, but equal amounts of damage. They'll both get the job done. They can both get to interesting depths and soul stuff on environments. Don't bank on getting things like Obliteration, but if you do get them, that's fantastic. Any build on this list is something that doesn't require specific uniques to operate, but just requires the knowledge of playing the build and just tweaking it again with these specifications. The Deadeye, Icicle Mine, or Attack Mines. Icicle Mine, extremely good. I think this will probably be like, in my opinion, this is probably the best build you're going to see after a certain point. A lot of them go Deep Delve. This is an example of someone playing Icicle Mine. They're using Coward's Legacy to keep CI, but also use Pain Attunement. If we're not going to have access to this, you can just use Pain Attunement, and, you know, there's your damage. Again, they have access to a lot of cluster jewels. When you won't, you can reinvest this into curses, and then you'll gain more curse effectiveness and more damage through that way. I have a hard time with a lot of Deep Delve builds in general. They spend upwards of 40-50 points on cluster jewels. We're not going to have that, so you have to redirect that point somewhere to get more damage. Trickster / Pathfinder Chaos Dot, so whether it's bow or skill, probably your most popular archetype amongst mid to shallow delvers. You got a whole mess of builds here. You have Essence Drain, Toxic Rain, Blade Vortex, Blade Blast, Caustic Arrow, Blade. You know, you can run the gamut on any sort of way you want to do it, but some sort of Chaos Dot builds, they're all pretty strong and pretty viable. Mine, Ball Lightning / Glacial Cascade. It's just pretty much any mine skill. Ball Lightning and Glacial just tend to be the best. You could do Freezing Pulse if you wanted, totally fine. You could do Fireball. I wouldn't suggest Fireball. Arc, again, is okay, but, you know, you want to have either gross damage from Ball Lightning or the shatters from Glacial Cascade and Freezing Pulse. Any sort of mine build is, again, totally viable. Cultist Cold Dot, again, a very, very, very going to be popular decision. A lot of Vortex, a lot of Creeping Chill, a lot of Cold Snap, some combination of the three. That'll pretty much get you there. CI, it's a little bit rough, but you do have access to infinite dense fossils in a way, so you can craft yourself some nice gear. Champion, Earthshatter, Impale. So these are people playing champion builds using mostly Earthshatter, but you can do pretty much any Impale skill you want. Earthshatter tends to be the best with the damage-wise, but it's more buttons. If you want to click more buttons, that's your call. If not, you can do something like Shattering or Splitting Steel. Ground Slam, of course, even. You're not going to have access to the Steel Jewels necessarily easily, but you can get them technically. Gladiator, Lacerate / EQ. You can also toss in Split Arrow in this mix, but it's pretty much any of the Gladiator Bleed builds or the Gladiator Max Block builds. If you want to introduce Split Arrow, you can, but keep in mind, again, they have issues when it comes to they're clear without having line eyes, without having clusters. You have a lot of points to put in and nowhere to put them. You have all these points, and then you have another 10 points right there, and you have another 5 points right there. Then you're going to have to put somewhere in the tree, because you don't have clusters. You're really not going to have a line eyes fall, and you're not going to have a ring Thread of Hope. So that's a lot of points you're going to have to figure out where to place, and that's going to be one of the biggest hurdles for a lot of people, is where you're going to put all your excess points and cluster jewels. So figure that bad boy out. And finally, I put Necro Tanky Caster. So any of the Necromancer Tanky Caster builds, whether it's even Summon Skeletons or Cremation or Blade Blast or Volatile Dead, you know, you're not going to have access to a Trigger Wand, which does suck, but they are pretty strong. It's your standard Archmage, Cremation Caster, Archmage, Volatile Dead Caster. They'll get the job done. Great in a hardcore setting, which essentially is what you want for Shallow Delve. But yeah, that pretty much covers every single build. If you are picking a build and you're planning on going deep and it doesn't fit into one of these categories, I wish you the best, and I am questioning your sanity. But I'd love to hear what you guys are playing. I'm not sure what I'm going to play yet. I'm most likely just going to spin a wheel the day of and just pick one, because I live my life by the wheel, I die by the wheel. Following these tips and tricks, at least for things you want to have, will help you immensely. Getting a lot of these setups and checking a lot of these boxes, whether it's having a Cast Never Taken setup, or having a Phase Run setup, or having a General Cries Vigilant Strike setup, or even a Frostwall setup, having a single target setup, having a clear setup, having all these types of things, trying to get your blind in, trying to get your Culling Strike in, trying to get your Elemental Muties in. If you can tick all these boxes, you'll have really no problem getting to like 600, 700, 800 depth. Past then it gets a little fucky, but yeah, you should be able to, grind your way out. And again, once you get to about depth 200, all right, depth 170, 171 is where you start to get monster level 83, which is where it caps for experience effectively. That's probably going to be depth 200 in this league if they crunch it down. So once you get to like depth 215, you could just go left and right if you want until you get to level 90, 94. And it'll be very easy to do that. And then once you get to like 94, you're pretty much done leveling for the most part. After that, just go straight down. Unless you're having, if your build's good, you can always go down. But if you're having issues, don't feel free to go left and right as much as you want. The little good note to know is that at depth 600, that's the cap for city spawns. So if your goal is to farm gear out in cities and farm gear from bosses, you just want to get to 610. Then you can go left and right, and you'll have the no issue with finding cities, no issue with finding bosses very frequently. And you can farm the bosses for the uniques, and they're not bad. The cities themselves will probably be a boon for a lot of your gear. But yeah, that's my general plan and strategies and things to know about this whole event. And there's a lot of good information here, and I'll put in the thing below. And again, you could check out all these builds and check out all these different archetypes, and I'm sure you'll find something that fits your fancy. These are all tried and tested builds that fit within the confines of the brief of what this Endless Delve League is. So hopefully you pick something good, hopefully you have a great time, and I'll see you guys in Endless Delve. I am Lighty, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.